Professor Louth, what issues were discussed at your session?
The overall topic of the session was really Byzantine understanding of the Crusades. How did the Byzantines react to, or indeed how do they understand what the Crusades were about? And there were three papers. The first was by George Demokopoulos, who really sought to apply post-colonial theory to the idea of the Crusades, which is interesting. It's a new way of approaching. It draws on a great deal of reflection on post-colonialism, and clearly, in certain respects, it fits with the Byzantine reaction. I mean, the particular point I think that came out in George's paper and the discussion is that post-colonialism raises questions of identity for the post-colonial. I mean, who are we when we've been who are we when we were colonized and after we've been colonized? And clearly, it's questions like that, questions of identity, who did what we call, but they didn't. The Byzantines think they were. That becomes a rather sharpened question as a result of the Crusades, because before the Crusades, the Latins were thought of as being an extension of us. There were tensions, but they were all Christians, all kept the faith. And that Byzantines finding themselves on the sort of the receiving end of the Crusades, or some of them, this clearly raises questions of identity, which George sought to explore in terms of post-colonialism. Dr. Chrysis' point was a rather different point, that it is often maintained, particularly by Orthodox theologians, that there is no notion of holy war within Orthodoxy, that there's no sense that that war can be regarded as there's no notion of a just war, there's no justification of war. It is a regrettable necessity at best. And Chrysis shows that many of the Byzantines would not have thought in those terms. Many of them approved of the crusade, which was not against them, but against the infidels. And though their reaction is more complex than what happened in the Latin West by 20 or 30 years after the beginning of the Crusades, people like Bernard were saying that soldiers who died fighting for the faith immediately would go to heaven because they were martyrs. Byzantines rarely got that far, but they were certainly sympathetic towards that way of looking at things, though no more than that. But the overall question that kept on coming back, though, was this question of identity. And one of the points that was raised and pursued quite a bit in the discussion is that it's very difficult. It's difficult to discuss because the Byzantines didn't have a word for it, who they were. They called themselves Romans, basically, and though that notion was shifting, and though they, of course, were described by the Latins as Greeks, which was intended an insulting term. And occasionally they took this on board. The notion is complicated by then sort of not having a word for who they were, increasingly.